So Alexander Volkanovski has just beaten Diego Lopes by decision. I scored it 4 rounds to 1 for Volk, only giving Lopes the second round because of the knockdown. Volk is the champion again, and for that reason I've put together a tier list of about 11 fighters around Volkanovski's weight division who are likely to face him in the near future, and we're going to rank their chances of winning. The first fighter we're going to talk about, I think, is the most likely next contender for the title, and that is going to be Movsar Evloev. Now, just to be clear, even though I put Evloev in the low chance tier, I think Evloev is really good. I think he beats a guy like Gene Silva. I think he beats a guy like Yair Rodriguez. However, specifically when it comes to Volk, what you really need to beat him is finishing ability. Lopes was a very dangerous fight because of his finishing ability. With the exception of Max Holloway, every time Volk has been in danger in any way, it's because his opponent is very dangerous, whether on the ground or on the feet. Ilia Topuria is one of the most dangerous fighters on the feet. Brian Ortega is one of the most dangerous fighters on the ground. Islam Makhachev is also dangerous on the feet. And on the ground, Chad Mendes dropped him and he's very powerful. But if a fighter doesn't have much finishing ability, they have to beat Volk technically. And I don't think Evloev can do that. We've seen Volk defend several takedowns against the best grappler in the sport, Islam Makhachev, in a higher weight division. I don't think anyone can take down Volk at 145. And on the feet, I don't think it's close. I think Arnold Allen outstruck Evloev in their fight. And as I mentioned earlier about finishing ability, Evloev has 0 finishes in the UFC. If his first finish is versus Volkanovski, I'd be very surprised, which is why he's in low chance. Which is going to take us to the Bantamweight champion of the world, Merab Dvalishvili, who's also going alongside Evloev. Now my reasoning here is the exact same as I had with Evloev. Merab has 0 finishing potential versus Volk, and I can see Merab being someone who doesn't have as much success when he's the smaller man. Volkanovski naturally is a lot bigger and a lot stronger than Merab, and I think Volk could easily just out-wrestle him. They both basically did the exact same thing versus Jose Aldo, except by far Volk is the better striker and it's not even close, and for that reason I find it very difficult to see a path for Merab to win, which is going to take us to someone who I think does have a path to win versus Volk, Sean O'Malley, who's going to go in close fights here. Now, because a lot of UFC fans lack critical thinking, some of you may see O'Malley being above Merab, even though Merab beat O'Malley, and you think that must be wrong. Merab's better than O'Malley, so he'll have a better chance versus Volk. That's not how it works at all. They're two completely different styles in every single way. O'Malley perfectly fits the criteria of someone who's dangerous on the feet. O'Malley has the frame of a featherweight, so unlike Merab, he won't be undersized. I also get the feeling O'Malley might be the best striker in the UFC. That may be a bold statement, but consider that no one's actually outstruck O'Malley on the feet. Petr Yan had to wrestle to beat O'Malley. People think Yan beat O'Malley based on the wrestling. He's got one punch power, so naturally it's a very dangerous fight for Volk. The only downside for O'Malley is that naturally he's not very strong. He's not really built to defend takedowns, so it could end up being closer to the Yair Rodriguez fight if Volk chooses to wrestle. But I'm assuming that O'Malley would bulk a bit more for 145. So if he's even able to stuff some takedowns versus Volk, I think it's a 50-50 fight. Which is going to take us to someone who's also dangerous, Charles Oliveira, in the same tier. Oliveira's not as good technically on the feet as O'Malley, but he's bigger, more powerful and can grapple. He's not got a submission in a while, but he is still one of the most dangerous people on the ground that the UFC's ever seen. There's quite a few areas where Oliveira would be dangerous versus Volk. On the feet, a 1-2 on the chin might put down Volk. In the clinch, Oliveira is very good with his knees and elbows, etc. Obviously the submission threat on the ground. What evens it out for Volk is the fact that I think Volk is a much superior striker to Oliveira. Oliveira's defense on the feet has never been great, and while Volk isn't a power puncher, he is very accurate, and Oliveira will be hit very clean very often on the feet. So it's basically finishing ability versus pure skill, and it's a hard one to call, which is going to take us further in the same tier to Dustin Poirier. I can see myself being very nervous watching Volk on the feet versus Poirier. As much as Volk may be a lot better technically compared to Poirier, Poirier is one of the biggest punchers at 155. Volk finds himself getting hurt every single fight nowadays, and Poirier has some of the best finishing instincts in the UFC. However, like I said, Volk I think is technically superior, so he could win the fight if he avoids danger, skirts on the outside, gets a couple takedowns in, but it is again another difficult one to call, which is going to take us a bit further down to Justin Gaethje, who's going to go in the decent chance tier. Now, Justin Gaethje may be more dangerous and more reckless compared to Poirier. He's also more beatable compared to Poirier. There's more paths to victory to beat him. Justin Gaethje has very minimal defensive jiu-jitsu, so while Volkanovski doesn't really have a submission threat, he could easily out-wrestle Gaethje, keep him against the cage, neither thigh, etc. Volk is also technically much superior to Gaethje on the feet. Every jab Volk throws, he will land. But Gaethje does have a very strong puncher's chance because of the uppercut and how reckless he can be in general, which is going to take us further down to a quadrilogy fight with Max Holloway. Again, I know that Max Holloway beat Justin Gaethje, but styles make fights. Very different situations. Volk is 3-0 versus Holloway. In their first fight, Max maybe won a single round, and even then you can make a case for Volkanovski winning every single round of the fight. The rematch was a different situation, but there are also circumstances surrounding that fight. Volk was apparently waken up halfway through his sleep by USADA before the fight, meaning he had to take some supplements to regain his energy, which would explain why he looks a lot slower in the first 2 rounds of the fight. Even then I thought Volkanovski won the last 3 rounds quite clearly. People just claimed it was a robbery because they wanted Holloway to win. And obviously the trilogy wasn't close at all. One of the best performances in UFC history. It's hard to see a path to victory for Holloway, especially since Holloway is really going to struggle to make it back down to 145. And I don't think Volk is going to fight Max at 155. It wouldn't make any sense. And that is why Holloway is down there. Which is going to take us to the original opponent that Volk was supposed to fight last weekend. A rematch with Ilia Topuria. I think it's quite simple, this pick. Everything I said about finishing ability on the feet is going to be at its most obvious versus Ilia. While you can make the excuse for Volk getting knocked out by Makhachev in the second fight by a head kick, because it was quite literally on 2 weeks' notice, even though it was a quick turnaround from the Islam fight, I see Volk getting knocked out by Ilia in his own division. It's something that would happen every time they fight. Ilia is simply too dangerous. He's the best boxer in the UFC, by far. Volk's chin is not getting any better. His speed isn't getting any better. I find it very hard to see Volk beating him, which is going to take us to someone else. Conor McGregor. Now, I am aware that Conor McGregor is not going to fight Alexander Volkanovski. I'd be surprised if Conor even fights in the UFC again. The reason Conor's in this video is for views and viewer retention and to stretch the time a bit longer. Which is going to take us to a real active fighter in the UFC, Arman Tsarukyan. Arman is going to go alongside Ilia Topuria. Arman's a bit of a nightmare matchup for Volk in quite a few ways. He's stronger than Volk, he's bigger than Volk, and I think most importantly, he's very dynamic on the feet. I can especially see him knee in the clinch knocking out Volkanovski, exactly the same way Arman did to Beneil Dariush. Arman's defense is still lacking a little bit on the feet, but considering that Volk is a smaller point fighter, I can't see it being really important in their fight. I think Arman is simply too big and too dangerous. Speaking of dangerous, our next opponent also fought this weekend. Gene Silva, who's going to go in decent chance. This is a very realistic fight in the next year. Let's say Gene Silva goes on to fight Brian Ortega next. I think he knocks out Brian Ortega, and in that case he may be next in line for the title, because I don't see any more contenders after Evloev. Gene Silva is extremely dangerous, one punch power, very fast. He also showed very good takedown defense and submission ability versus Bryce Mitchell. However, he may just be a similar case to Diego Lopes, where he's super dangerous on the feet but not quite good enough to land a knockout. I also see Volk's leg kicks being a big issue versus Silva because of how wide Silva's stance is, but it is a dangerous fight for Volk and one he could lose. Which is going to take us to our final pick, Islam Makhachev. Makhachev is also going and will win. Islam seems to just keep getting better. He's beaten Volk twice already. He's the best fighter in MMA, and that's going to do it for the video. Like and subscribe. Let me know what you think of the list. Who do you disagree with the most? Who do you disagree with the least? Let me know. Goodbye.